Operations Student Transportation Services contract. This item provides an addendum to the agreement with First Group America, Inc., doing business as First Student, to provide various student transportation services for the 1920 school year. It is recommended the district extend the agreement with First Group America, Inc., doing business as First Student, to provide various required and requested student transportation services, e.g. regular education, required special education, ADA 504, McKinney-Vento, athletics, fine arts, various shuttle services, charter and activity bus services, etc., from different funding sources, not to exceed the amount of $33 million, depending on programming and enrollment needs. This addendum will mark the 11th year with First Student and the first of a 5-year contractually negotiated addendum after a 10-year contract that will be evaluated, reviewed, and presented annually to the Board of Education for approval. For required regular education and special education home-to-school transportation, this estimated amount is governed by the volume of services needed to transport students to and from schools and approved activity trips. Approximately 80% of special education transportation, IEP approved, audited expenditures are reimbursed to the district by the state of Kansas during the school year. The recommendation for 2021 school year is based on projected service quantities, updated rates for a 173 school day calendar, and a minor contingency amount for unexpected increases and/or emergency school relocations that may require transportation.
Welcome. This has been a long marathon. Are you glad to finally
kidding.
be
even,
here?
Even the intro was a
Yeah,
long
there you
marathon. Thank you, Dr. Mike. First and foremost, I am going to allow a couple members of our team that are presenting with me to introduce themselves. So,
Jonathan Weiss, I'm the purchasing manager for the district.
Good evening, Lisa Riveros, Transportation Director.
and of course, I'm Fabiana Ramirez, the Director of Operations for the district. First, President Logan, Vice President Rhodey, Superintendent Thompson, members of the board, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come in here tonight and share with you what is the culmination of almost a 1.5-year process. As we continue, we are going to present to you what the future of transportation for our district is going to look like. We've structured the presentation in a way because it is such a complicated operation in many ways, and I think a lot of our community often doesn't understand how complicated it is. So we're going to give you a little bit of the 101 before we get into what is the addendum and then also the process that we followed. So, Lisa.
All right, so let me tell you how our transportation works. First off, we safely transport 16,000 students, or a little more than that, each and every day. The greatest number of buses that we had on the road was in 2011, and we had 531, and that was underneath First Student's umbrella. And this year, we had a low of 396, and right now we're sitting at about 403 buses maximum on the road at a time. So we operate under a 3-tier system. And what this means is that one single bus driver can drive for 3 schools. So they can drive for our schools that start at 7 a.m., our schools that start at 8 a.m., and our schools that start at 9 a.m. Our ultimate goal is to have as many of these bus drivers driving all 3 tiers as possible, serving as many students as they can. And we're pretty close to as efficient as possible. 71% of our buses are triple tiered. And what that means is that driver may be working a little over 7 hours a day. 26% of our buses are double tiered. Generally, they are our 8 o'clock start schools and our 9 o'clock. And then just 3%, or actually it's rounded up a little bit less, are single tiered for unique situations. Big idea with what the work does of my team is they use the Edulog software, and with this software, it helps determine where bus stops should be so that they are fair for all students who ride a bus. It's very cool technology. Next, I want to present some data. And when I say we transport 16,000 students a day, or more than that, where do those numbers come from? Who are we transporting? And here's the deal. About 39% of our students live over 2.5 miles from the school. And so that equates to about 6,300 of our students being transported because they're far from school. They're 2.5 miles or further. Magnet and IB programs are 4,200 of our students, and these buses go all over the city. They pick up kids all along the way to get them to their magnet school or their IB school. Hazardous is about 9.6% of the students that we transport. That's 1,561 students. They just don't have a safe walk path to get to school, but they live less than that 2.5 miles. We also transport students for special education services. These are the students who, per their IEP, have transportation as a related service, and that equates to about 11% of our students, right around 1,700. And then ELL students are students just learning English and going to special programs or special schools for that service. That equates to 1,092 of our students, about 6%. Space available are students who have a space available on a bus and get transported for that reason. So they may not qualify, but their home is close enough to a bus stop and we have open seats, so we allow them a pass on that bus. And we have 941 students who are on our buses for space available. And these are also our students who have been assigned from the hearing office. McKinney-Vento in ESSA, that's 214 students that get to be transported to their base schools. And then finally, we have students who are transported as an accommodation on their 504 plan, and that's 25 of our 16,000 students transported. This data was taken from last spring, and we get that data every spring to kind of compare it year over year and who are we serving. So at our 7 a.m. start schools, we have 283 buses on the road right now, 403 at our 8 a.m. start time, and then 398 at our 9 a.m. start time. So what that means is we have 1,084 groups of students that get transported home to school in the morning, and then again, we have 1,084 groups of students who get transported in the afternoon. So this right here is an example of what a bus driver's day may look like or what a bus does. And so if we go ahead and play this, the first tier is a regular ed bus that goes up to Brooks and arrives there at 6:45. And then that bus takes off from Brooks and picks up students on a special ed route and ends up there at the middle school at 7:45 a.m. And then if we play it one more time, we'll see that that driver picks up a few more students all around the city and then ends up at their 9 a.m. start school.
I'm restraining myself from singing the wheels on the bus. Sorry.
So in our current operation, we do have some challenges and a lot of successes. Most of our challenges are attributed to the driver shortage. Right now, we have an economy where there's not a lot of unemployment, and therefore there's not a lot of available bus drivers. And so when there's a driver shortage, that makes the buses available for field trips less because the drivers are taking kids to and from school, and they're not available to take kids on field trips. Also, bus runs, we have to be as efficient as possible. When we don't have many drivers, they're scheduled with no flexibility. They're timed out as much as we can. There's no extra wiggle room there. The buses are at capacity. We're picking up as many kids as we can. And then also, sometimes when they're timed out, there's the opportunity to be late. So we do have late buses if it can be a train or traffic or anything else like that. When everybody's out driving, sometimes office staff from First Student does serve our students in that capacity, and then the customer service may be lacking if having people available to answer the phones and things like that. There's continual driver attendance concerns, and then not necessarily related to the driver shortage, but we do have limited options for pairings. When you do have magnet schools or programs, buses are going all over the place, and sometimes it's harder to pair them together. And then our current fleet is 10 years old, so we do have mechanical issues as any vehicle that's 10 years old, and so that's a challenge that we have. But on the flip side, we have a whole lot of successes. One of the successes that we have is First View. First View is the app where parents can see where their bus is in real time, and that is fantastic. It's been a game changer. Also, Our drivers and our monitors love kids. And so I want to say that that's probably my favorite success, is that they understand dream, believe, and achieve, and they love what they do, which is incredible. There's almost 700 of them, and they do what they do because they love our kids. Another success is that as our year goes on, the performance of the buses improves, and it's getting better. And then another success is our contractor is so willing to be flexible when it comes to adding transportation to Chester Lewis this year, or early outs for parent-teacher conferences, or whatever we throw at them, they can make it work, and it's pretty incredible. We work as a team with First Student. We see them as one, the transportation department and them, and we work on goals together. And also our current contractor for Student is, they are open to the Wichita Transit Partnership, and they also have the ability to bring in guest drivers. So this year we started the school year not having all of our bus runs covered with a driver, and so they had contracts in other parts of the country that hadn't started school yet, so they brought in those guest drivers. Those guest drivers quickly learned Wichita and served our kids for a couple weeks until we could hire the people. So that is fantastic and a great thing that they did for us. We have a 100% pass rate for the start of year inspections, which means at the beginning of the year, all of our buses meet the requirements to be on the road to safely transport our kids. And then we have a 94% on-time performance rate as well. So those are great successes that I really like sharing with you. All right, so here is our current contract. It started as a 7-year contract, and then we had 3-year extensions, so we're actually in our 10th year. We control the number of school days in operation. So when our school's days were longer and we had less days versus now, we went back to the usual schedule. That was on us. And then we also have, we also tie our increases in price to CPI, which is to inflation or kind of cost of living expense raises.
Okay, so the long road that got us here. So at the beginning of last school year, we started looking at the idea that our contract that we're currently in was going to end, and what were we going to do next? We decided it'd probably be best to go out and solicit the marketplace, see what was going on out there. We did have a initial proposal of pricing and contract terms from First Student, but we still felt like we needed to get out there and see what was going on. So we spent some time developing an RFP, but ultimately decided we'd go out informally just to check out what was on the market, see what kind of responses we could get. And so we put it out there right around winter break last year. And over the next couple months, we got a couple responses and brought those vendors in for presentations and spent about the next 6 months after that really working through our scope of work and things like that, trying to get those two contracts as apples to apples as we possibly could and see really what we were working with. Ultimately, now we're coming to you to recommend First Student for a continuation of this contract. What we did find out whenever we were going through solicitation of the marketplace is, due to our size, we're very limited as to what vendors would work with us. It shifted, cost has gone up, technology's changed, things like that that are really affecting our bottom line right now. And if we were going to reduce our costs, we'd have to start looking at some other ways in terms of policy and things like that.
So now, kind of a little bit of how we got here. A little bit of information about First Student. They are a division of First Group America. They are the largest student transportation provider in the country, with operating over 460 locations across the U.S. and Canada. They manage 1,100 contracts, 5 million student journeys per school day, in a fleet of 42,500 buses. So again, and we are currently one of their, if not their largest contract in the country. So as we look at the details of the contract, the first thing that I want to make clear is once we got First Student's final proposal. The committee made the decision to go with them. At that point, we decided it would be easier and simpler for us to go for an addendum rather than create a whole contract altogether. We already had a contract with them with a lot of the terms laid out, so there was no need for us to reinvent the wheel. So those changes and pieces that were a part of this agreement of the proposal, then at that point we incorporated them into an addendum, and that's how we're operating. So just a few things about pricing. First, it's the same non-variable pricing structure, so we're operating under a similar pricing structure. That doesn't mean that there isn't any variability, but it is the same pricing structure that we're used to. So we pay a certain amount per bus per day, and we just multiply that by the number of routes that we operate. And so that makes it simple for us to project into the future and to be able to budget for any potential increases. The recommendation that we're bringing to you today for next school year, the recommendation is for a maximum approval amount of $33 million. Last year, for this current year, when we came to you for $27 million. So it is about a $6 million increase year over year. Important to note, as John mentioned earlier, when we solicited the market or we began through this process, we knew that we were significantly under market. 3 years ago, when we did the extensions, we felt we were around 20% under market. So that only expanded over the last 3 years. So as we continue with a part of this, then this sets the yearly increases at a set of 2.5% for any subsequent years. And it is a 5-year addendum. So those increases are set at a flat rate of 2.5, which makes budget planning a lot easier for Susan and her team as we look at consistency moving forward. As a part of this addendum, there's also an alternative vehicle expansion. What that is white fleet. It's vans that they're bringing into our market to be able to help with some of the unique transportation needs that we have, those McKinney-Vento students, or perhaps those runs that have a handful of students on them will be able to utilize their vans. The great part about those vans is not only are they cheaper than a traditional bus, but they also don't require a CDL driver. So that is kind of nice and twofold. It gives us flexibility, but it also helps them utilize them as a pipeline for CDL drivers. So drivers that maybe are not interested in driving a yellow bus today, they could bring in to help drive those alternative vehicles and potentially maybe move them or transition it into a CDL driving role into the future. The other part that I do want to make a little bit a clarification on is their charter pricing. Those increases to that particular type of transportation are a little bit higher than the rest, but there is flexibility within that for us to be able to look elsewhere, and partially is because they have to limit the number of buses that they make available during those school to home to school times, because our primary focus for those drivers should be driving our kids to school and home. And so us being able to go outside will allow our schools to have the flexibility to be able to take those field trips that maybe require them to be out a little bit longer. So there is a little bit of flexibility within that. As far as contract highlights that we have, again, it's an addendum for 5 years, so we would be with First Student through June of 2025. The technology enhancements are a huge part and a huge perk to this agreement. The first part that this addendum will bring is tablets. As you all know, technology has vastly improved over the last 10 years. I think we all greatly rely on this for everything from mapping to everything else. As part of this, they're bringing in tablets, which will allow to give drivers turn-by-turn directions. Currently, right now, we're operating under an old paper system, so it is not uncommon for drivers to be pulled on the side of the road looking to see their handwritten directions. This will allow them to get those turn-by-turn directions. It'll allow us to be able to also improve the operation because as we operate with subs, especially when we're short, they'll be able to designate if a sub is covering a particular route, just automatically go into the system, type in whatever route they're covering, and send it to them automatically versus them waiting at the school for a paper for them to complete their route. So those tablets really have the potential to really change the way that we do business and our on-time performance. Video, all of our buses are currently equipped with 2 cameras. That will continue, but the camera system that we're currently utilizing is obviously old, and so there are hard drives that are in those buses that keep those recording. Under the current system, a tech from First Student has to go out and pull them. Then after they pull them, they take them back, download it to their computers, then they edit them. And then at that point, then once they edit them, they do a play-by-play script that they write, they send to our schools. But if our schools want to view that video, they have to travel to our bus lots to be able to do it. Under this system, it's an automatic. As soon as those buses pull into the lots, it'll be an automatic download. They'll edit them, and then we're working with our IST department to create a system for next year where we'll make those videos available to our schools on site. So no longer will our school staff have to travel to our bus lots to be able to view video, which is a huge, huge benefit. Right now, I can tell you, think about Southeast High School. They have to travel all the way out to the north lot, which is at 235 in Meridian. So they're losing a good hour to an hour and a half of work time they could be spending in our schools just to go view video. So this has the potential to greatly improve our productivity. They're also adding an emergency radio channel, which is going to allow for us to have continued communication. So if there's an emergency, they'll flip to that channel without the need for us to do anything else. So that will help. And then First View. As Lisa mentioned, First View has been a benefit to our district. First Student has offered it to us as a part of this contract, and they'll continue, so we won't have to go out to get another vendor or another product. It'll continue as a part of that. Other pieces that are highlights, new buses. Over the next couple of years, they'll replace all of our buses. So they'll replace 220 for this upcoming school year, and then for the next school year, then they'll replace the other 200 buses in our fleet. Integrated seats. A lot of our special needs students and our pre-K kiddos require harnessing when they're transported, which creates issues, especially when you're short drivers and you're sending a sub to cover. Often they get to the school, but then they realize they don't have the right equipment. So these integrated seats have the potential for us not to need that additional equipment, because all you have to do is pull down the seat and you'll have what you need to be able to transport students. And then the last piece is increased driver wages. And their commitment to increased driver wages is not just starting next school year, but it is starting January of this year. They've already begun advertising the $18 an hour starting pay, which is what they're going to, and we've already seen that have a positive impact in the recruitment, as we're short a significant number of less drivers than we were at the beginning of the year. So that is a big game changer, and on top of that, they're also working on extending the pay to our senior drivers, so hopefully that will help on the retention end of things too. Additional details, and these are things that are new as a part of this agreement that First Student is bringing to us. First Serves, it is a training program for special education transportation. So they'll be offering our special needs drivers a special training that allows them to learn more about the types of students they transport. It also includes tools that our students are going to be able to utilize for the bus ride. Some cool things, some that we currently have in place. Obviously, they've have a lot more money, so they've been able to invest in a better product. And so we'll be able to incorporate that to help us and help our special needs students. First Feedback is something that I think you all are aware of. It's a website, firstfeedback.com, that they have developed to help our community give them feedback. And so anyone, whether it's a community member, whether it's a parent, whether it's a staff member, can log into firstfeedback.com and then type in whatever feedback they have. We often hear from our community that bus drivers are speeding or whatever concerns they have about buses. This will give them an avenue to be able to provide them feedback, and we'll have access to the feedback they receive, so that way we can communicate on how we can fix things. And First Acts is a behavior management reporting tool. Currently, we operate under an antiquated paper system, a 5-carbon. So if you want to really get to the bottom carbon, you have to write really hard, put a lot of pressure. And so as part of this is an online actual reporting tool. that we'll be able to utilize. They've been gracious enough that they're customizing it to our need. We have a district-wide behavior management program. We utilize the work of Safe and Civil Schools, and as part of our write-up system, is very specific for bus drivers. So they're customizing it to meet our need. And that will eliminate, again, the paper pencil system. It will also allow us to keep better track of behavior data, because often we don't know if there are any sort of trends in terms of the behavior that we're seeing on buses. Outside, when we get the hard paper, then at that point we tabulate, but this will be a more accurate tool for us to be able to analyze what's really going on in our buses and be able to address some concerns from a systemic standpoint. Driver recruitment and retention plan. When they submitted their proposal to us, we came back to them. We knew that driver recruitment and retention was a key part, a key concern for us because we've been short. And so as a part of the what they submitted to us, they presented to us a complete proposal of what they're planning to do to address that. Those not only include the driver wages, which we talked about, they're also improving the application flow. They're working on customer service as a part of that, and then they're also looking at addressing culture within the locations to help with some of that retention piece. So they did provide to us, and we're actually incorporating that piece, that proposal piece that they gave us into the addendum as a part of the contract. Other things that are a part of this, improved service action plans. Last week, they've asked us to identify several building principals, bus supervisors, district level department leaders, and they individually met with every single one of those people to get their concerns, to get their feedback, and they're developing issue-specific action plans to address some of the concerns that our stakeholders have. Again, the flexibility to continue and expand our WTA partnership. Another key piece that I give them credit for, as you all know, we've been doing a lot of work with our strategic plan and have implemented the 4 disciplines of execution as a part of our work. First Student has been a key member of that piece. They actually meet with Lisa to develop their goals, and they also present not only as a part of the operations division piece, but they also presented to DLT more recently too. So they have also, you talk about that alignment of resources and infrastructure, and they are also aligning their processes to what we're doing as a district. And then the last piece is liquidated damages. We are continuing, there is a liquidated damages portion to the addendum that's there. We modified the liquidated damages chart to make it more useful, so that way it allows them the data that we're providing them for liquidated damages that they can better utilize to help improve their systems. So that is really kind of the key details that we have as part of the agreement. Okay, so now if you guys have questions for us.
Yeah, Julie does.
First of all, I want to thank you and your team. I know this process has been long and kind of grueling, so I want to thank you and your team. And 3 of you are sitting here, but you had some other members on the team as well.
Yes, we had members of finance. We also had members, obviously, of legal counsel. Transportation was represented. That was part of our core team, but when we did presentations, we also brought in some building principals, some department leads, like athletics, and then some of our levels, district level superintendent, assistant superintendents, or their executive director. So when they did those presentations to look at what options we had out there, we expanded that group a little further.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for all that work. And I think you showed on an earlier slide that you had 7 vendors initially that presented information.
No, ma'am, we sent it out to 7.
Oh, you
vendors, and
sent it
we only
out
had
to
3
7.
total that responded.
Okay, so out of those 3, and you finally worked it out to come to this recommendation, tell us a little bit about that process and why you decided that First Student was the best of those 3 options, such that you're recommending that tonight.
There were several factors. Obviously, pricing is a key part of it. Again, the pricing for First Student and what they provided us was better than the other options that we had out there, not only to start out, but also the set 2.5% increases over the next few years, which allow us to better plan financially. Their overall pricing structure is also more suited towards the long-term planning for us, which was a crucial part of it. And we knew, as we engaged in this process, that that down the line, if we were going to have any sort of reductions in what we're paying for transportation, we would need to do some infrastructure changes. And under that pricing structure, it gives us the flexibility to be able to do that. Obviously, the product offerings that they have, all the add-ons and the technology pieces that they're able to bring, also made our decision a little bit easier. And then they are the largest vendor in the country, so the infrastructure that they're able to bring, from bringing in the guest drivers at the beginning of the year and some of the supports that they're able to provide, also made them a better choice.
Thank you.
Okay. Ben?
Julie touched on it, but I wanted to, because I had a constituent question earlier today that specifically addressed whether parent input, district parent input was in the selection process. Now, I know that's not typically, done, but can you confirm that some of the people on the selection committee are also parents of students that are served by our transportation system?
We did have at least one person that is a current parent. They're a staff member, but they are a current parent that was a part of that group.
Okay. And Dr. Thompson, I'm going to fill in for Stan's role because he's not here. I'm going to, it probably is a request, but will we be receiving regular reports on performance of this contract as it plays out?
Yes. As he stated earlier in his presentation, we will be receiving different types of data now because we have technology where we're able to track behavior data on the buses. You're able to track, like we already do, on time. You're able to track your recruitment and retention efforts. There's just so many other things. I can go on and on from the pages of all of the things that we will begin to collect data upon, and we will then be able to bring back reports on a regular basis. We also have had commitments from the different levels of the organization to also have regular ongoing conversations and problem-solving meetings to make sure that we together are ensuring that we have the best quality for our students in our community.
Okay. Because I think one of the things that, at least from my perspective as a board member, input we receive is very targeted. It's very there is one specific problem at this specific incident, and so I'm hoping that we can identify those kind of trends systematically and work to correct them.
And that is one of the things he just talked about. The example that he had given was that they were meeting with building administrators where there are hot spots, is what we call them. And those hot spots are places where we have, some not necessarily significant, but have some issues or concerns that need to be solved, some problems that need to be solved. So what we do there is that you will be able to have a team of people that will be able to identify that and put a plan of action in place to support that school and the concerns that may be there, if it is a systematic thing, not necessarily one-on-one things, but if there's a legitimate concern for the program at that particular site, that is what we will problem solve and work together as a unit to solve.
Excellent. Thank you.
And the other part is that first feedback website too. I think it'll allow us, as they're collecting data, for us to look at it from a more of a systemic approach. So if more of our community is giving us that same type of feedback, we'll be able to identify those trends and figure out what we need to address from that too. So that is a great tool that I would encourage you all to, as you hear feedback from the community, to promote also.
Mike?
As you know, I'm Mr. Technology.
Dun, dun, dun.
You know better than that. One of the things that you said concerned me, the use of tablets. We have a texting and problem with people driving and paying attention to their phones instead of going down the road. And are these bus drivers going to be looking at their tablet instead of the road to see where they're going, or how does that tablet work?
I think there's a significant level of training that will go along with that, and I think there's some limitations. They'll be able to speak to it a little bit more than I am. I know that was a concern for years because we've been pushing them on tablets since I got to transportation in 2011, and I think one of their concerns was that safety component of it. So I'm sure that there's parameters there that I think they can explain a little bit better as Mr. Oslin comes up. So.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Julie?
Yeah, I also think we're going to have an opportunity to meet the CEO of First Student, but I, like Ben, have had have heard some comments from some community members, and for the number of students we transport, they're small, but any child who has a concern, any parent that has a concern for their child is important, and we're concerned about, we care about safety for all of our kids. So I'm wanting to hear, and Fabian's named a few of the examples, but I'm wanting to hear how customer service is going to improve with this extension of our contract, so that some of those customer service issues that we've heard of as board members currently with First Student, how we can have confidence as a board that if we approve this addendum, how in the future we're going to be able to have some greater accountability at a higher level of customer service performance.
Absolutely, and I'm going to, at this time, turn to Fabian so that he can introduce our guest, so that they can have an opportunity, unless you have a response, but I'm sure
I
she's
do have a
wanting
little
to
bit of a
respond.
response before,
But
and I hope I'm not stealing his thunder. So, but
he says steal the thunder.
But as part of what we asked them to give back to us before we made a final decision was for them to create a customer service plan. So I know that they've been working on doing customer service training over the last month and a half. They're also, again, looking at their phone system, because there were some limitations with their phone system. So they're looking at doing some phone system upgrades that's going to allow them to do better service. But again, I don't want to say too much. With us today, as we move forward with this, we wanted their district leadership, as we know that there have been some discussions. We wanted them to come back and to really talk to you and tell you what they see the future of First Student in this community will be. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Paul Esland, who is the president of First Student.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate this opportunity to meet you and
Well,
hear
thank you.
your
Thank you
information.
very much, President Logan, Dr. Thompson, and the rest of the board. It is great to be with you here tonight. John Billigmeyer, our regional vice president, who lives here in Wichita, is with me as well. Lisa and Fabian, you guys did an awesome job. I want to borrow that little bus routing vehicle sometime soon. That is terrific. By the way, these folks, I interact with over 1,000 customers across North America, and you're very well represented by Lisa and Fabian. They are passionate advocates for your schools, and they are passionate advocates for your taxpayers. It has been a grueling process to get to this point. And by the way, I think I saw Tom Powell wander in. He fits that same category as well. He is, my respect for him has grown through this process, and he's a very strong advocate for the district. You're very well served to have all of these folks. Thank you for allowing me to come here this evening. Thanks for the relationship we've had over the 10 years. We are very anxious to build off of that relationship and to continue to invest in improving service and improving that relationship. There have been some challenges over the course of this contract, as it's really become rather stale. It's become stale in terms of pricing, and we have taken the financial burden of that. We've not stepped away from that. Over the last 10 years, we've taken driver wages from $12 when we started this contract up to a starting now of $18. So it's actually gone up 50%, whereas the actual pay in this contract's gone up about 22%. So we have stepped up and moved those price points up, but we have record unemployment. It's a 50-year low unemployment across the country, a 20-year low, as I understand it, here in Wichita. And the reality is we got to continue to be vigilant about who we hire to do these things. These are hard jobs. They're challenging jobs. They're done by great people that are mission-driven, just like all of you folks are, and all of us that are in this industry are. We've always been very good at recruiting. If you see us out, you should see us out in the communities. Every week we're out in the communities, and we always have been that way. This location, from our perspectives and how we measure these things, has been a relatively well-run location. In fact, over the past year, we secured over 550 applications. But as we've announced as a part of these discussions, we've accelerated that increase we planned for next fall when the money was there to pay for it. We accelerate to January 1st. We've seen 380 applications over the last 2 months. And we have, I checked today, we have 27 people in training. We have a higher driver number than we've had in a long time. We're in a position to start to take on additional routes, which is what's occurring now. So we see the first step relative to the questions about services, we've got to get this thing staffed. And by the way, I appreciate the comments and the recognition for bringing drivers in from places like Minnesota before Labor Day. I don't really want to do that. That's a very expensive thing to do, and you really don't want me to do that. We all want Wichita residents driving Wichita routes. That's what makes the best service, whether you're a special needs child, a homeless child, or a regular education child. So our scope and scale does allow us to do those things. It's not the best thing for service. It's certainly not the best thing for financial performance of a contract. And it's really not the best thing even for the community. The best thing is to be fully staffed so that our folks are sitting in the chairs they should be and dispatched to answer phones, to work with Lisa and her team to make sure our kids are getting to school every day. So I think a part of this improvement certainly relates to the investment we're making in driver wages and recruiting and retention. And you're seeing those benefits now, in fact, as we've accelerated some of those. Again, but I don't want you to get the sense we've not actively managed this contract. We have, and I've been close to this. I've been with First Student for about 3.5 years, been in the industry for 7 or 8 years. I am new to the president role, but I'm very operation-oriented. I've been here 4 or 5 times and continue to work very closely with Dr. Thompson and the rest of the team. And my predecessor as Chief Operating Officer, Dean Surrey, same thing, very operations guy, will stay very close to this. So as we work through this process, and from the perspective in Cincinnati and headquarters is all of our metrics say this is a well-run location that has some challenges around driver shortage driven by the wages we're paying, which is not unusual. 85 to 90% of the districts across the country have challenges with driver shortages right now. CDLs are hard to come by. These jobs by nature, the market decides what they're paid. Right? We can pay these drivers whatever you want to pay them, but somebody has to pay for that. So it's not unusual to have a driver shortage. But the other piece that we've received very clearly from our client here is there's other things involved here that we need to make sure we pay very close attention to. We all want to feel like we're very valued when we come to work every day. It doesn't matter if your job is president of the school board, whether you're president of a $2.5 billion company, whether you're the janitor, the food service person, or a paraprofessional, you want to feel you're really valued. So we are working real hard on that. We feel like we were doing a good job with that. We checked our driver survey scores, and we have actually recently done customer service training for all of our staff at our locations. We have safety programs that are very positive oriented in terms of their approach. Be Safe programs, 4-to-1 ratio, 4 positive reinforcements. When you see someone going up the steps, I chuckle. Every time I'm out at the location, there's a railing there that was put in place. I think they put my name on it maybe. For safety, I mean, we want positive. When we see a driver coming off a bus and taking this, using the handrail, we call it 3 points of contact. The idea is that recognize that as a positive thing, not just pointing out the negatives. So we do a lot of things to try and get drivers and aides and everyone to feel good about coming to work every day, because attendance is important and retention is critical. Retention is critical. There's a lot of turnover in this industry. This type of work really fits some people's schedules great. You better like kids to begin with, but it's a part-time work. That's tough work. You're getting up at 6 in the morning in a cold winter and coming to work and running a split shift, and particularly when you guys went to a shorter schedule there for those 2 years, made for a longer day without necessarily more pay to it. So it has to be the right people that we do that with. So our commitment is strong. The technology piece is important. It always has been to us. We've been leaders on everything from the everyone off thing that makes sure when you turn the key off, you have to walk to the back of the bus to not leave the student on, to GPS. Those are all things that our company has developed over the years. And I think tablets will be the same thing. So we're working state by state because the state regulatory authorities might have the same questions and concerns. So these tablets won't be interactive once you're on the bus. They actually will let a driver know if he's speeding or not. That is a good thing to know. And they will have the turn-by-turn directions there when needed, but they won't be interactive where the driver's necessarily interacting with them. But they will be helpful there when someone is on a route that they've not been on before. Instead of looking down at a sheet of paper, which they would be doing anyway, they'd have something dynamic in front of them. And I think it will help us as we make changes in routes as well. You know, with a lot of special needs students and Medicare-Evento kids and stuff, changes do occur pretty frequently. So we're encouraged about tablets. We're still rolling them out really for the first time in 5 or 6 locations. We're going to settle that, make sure the tablets are settled in. We are starting the implementation here in terms of putting the brackets on and getting the tablets ordered, but we want to make sure we've got everything worked out and trialed appropriately before we roll them out in a full way here in Wichita. I think Fabian might have done a better job than I could talking about first acts and first feedback and some of those things, so I think I will leave that alone. But those are things we're excited about, right? It's a good way of capturing. If we have a driver that's doing things that he or she shouldn't be doing, and somebody's calling and complaining, it really needs to be documented and a place we can see that. By the way, we have a bunch of tools. You know, when you're a location manager working for First Student, you come in every morning, you get a daily dispatch that tells you who was speeding the day before, who was accelerating fast, who was braking hard, who was idling excessively, and we are taking that and leveraging that further into driver scoring and all sorts of things like that. But it still gets back to all that technology we bring, it gets back to the people that manage it. It's people like Carrie Dixon that's here, and the local team has a huge part in their mindset. And again, as an operations person, I know that technology is nice and it's an enabler, but what matters is the people and the culture. And the partnership. Again, I think this is a partnership, and that's why, probably as much as anything, I'm really pleased that we'll continue the relationship if this extension is approved. Because we do view this as a partnership. We're very involved in the community. You should see those things. We do that every year, all sorts of things, because we want to be good community stewards. Anyway, it's a bit about First Student and a bit about why we're here. Any questions?
Ron?
Thank you, sir, for being here. I was just wanting to find out, some of my colleagues had talked about earlier about constituencies and, you know, people asking us about different things about transportation.
Sure.
And this is always puzzling to a lot of people, but if somebody says, well, how come we can't buy vehicles that run on alternative fuel or electric or so on?
Yeah.
But what comes first? Is it something that the company has to purchase and then sell it to us, or do we have to request it? So how do those things happen? And I mean, is it really feasible to even have, you know, that kind of alternative?
Yeah, so obviously
things?
really important subject across the world right now. And it does tend to manifest itself into the request for proposals. So oftentimes it's pretty customer driven. We run propane buses a lot of places. We run some CNG buses some places. We're now running 7 or 8 electric buses. But I'll tell you, like, electric buses cost $400,000 or $500,000, and somebody has to pay for that. And they've come with their own safety challenges too. These are really high voltage things. Batteries that when they start on fire, they burn. There's no way of putting them out. You let them burn. So there's a variety of things that go with that. So if the district was intent on propane, we could do that. That's not what was negotiated here or spec'd. We could. Now those things have some limitations too. If you're going to take the team, you know, up to Kansas City for a game, you're not going to do it on propane unless you've got places to fill it along the way. Again, has some other safety and training implications that we all have to pay a lot of attention to, because that stuff's very volatile as well. But it is typically customer driven. And electric is an area where there's a lot of industry interest. So what's attractive about school buses relative to the electrification is it comes back to the same place, which means you got a place to plug it in, and it doesn't run a ton of miles. I mean, a typical school bus might run 12,000 miles a year versus an over-the-road truck, which could run tens of thousands of miles a year. So on the surface, it's attractive, but it's like any new technology, government entities got to be part of that, the electrical industry's got to be part of that. Usually there's some grants involved that need to be a part of that. Up in Quebec, Canada, for instance, they're pretty progressive. We're running 7 or 8 buses there, but they actually put an RFP out that included, the district had already received the grants, and hence you only needed like a 20% premium on the price. So it's like a lot of things. If you have the budget for it, we can do about anything, but most districts in the end have the interest and not necessarily the budget yet. But there is a pretty good sense that 10, 20 years from now, a substantial part of the yellow bus market will be electrified. There is that view. So we deal all the time we deal directly with Daimler, which makes Thomas buses. We deal with International Navistar, which makes International. Neither of them really have a electric bus that's market ready yet. There's a company called Lion Bus that has one, and they're running some, mostly manufactured in Canada. But lots of questions. Like the length of the battery just is an open question. Who's going to pay for those batteries? Because they probably need to be repurchased before a 10-year cycle is up. You can deload those things. So part of the value of having a yellow bus fleet might be that you do some load sharing plugged in to the market. But that gets back to all the different entities that have to be involved to make that work. Good question, Ron.
Thank you. A lot to consider. Appreciate it.
I have two questions. One is about the tablets, and I know I've just been out of town and I used my phone for my GPS,
Yeah.
and it talked to me, so I didn't have to be looking at the tablet. Will your tablets be verbal?
Yes, they will, and in fact, I was going to address that. You had asked about distractions with these tablets. When the vehicle starts moving, the screen goes blank and it becomes completely audible. So the turn-by-turn directions become audible. If the vehicle is speeding, there's an audible warning. Until the bus stops, that screen stays off. Once the bus stops, the screen comes on. The driver at that point, while the vehicle is stopped, can check his next turns, check his next stops, whatever they need to do. Count kids on, count kids off will be a part of this as well, so that there's some student tracking abilities with these. So to answer your question simply, yes, it will be very audible.
Thank you. And my second question is, I know this is a 5-year addendum to our contract. Is there anything built into this to extend it, or would we be renegotiating in 5 years?
There isn't any extension built in at this point. That doesn't mean we couldn't come to the table and discuss, but as of now, it's just the
A 5-year
5-year.
addendum. Thank you. Julie?
Thank you for coming, and
Very
you did
welcome.
give us a lot of good information. I still didn't hear a commitment to every single one of our parents in our district that
Yeah.
has a concern, especially a safety concern regarding their kids, and a commitment to working through those issues so that we can ensure our parents and our students are going to have absolutely 100% safe transportation.
All right, so here's what I will tell you. I will give you a commitment that we're going to work with all your principals, with all your parents, with your representatives here to run the safest, highest level of service that you can procure from anyone. What I cannot commit to you or your parents is things will not happen. When you are running 400 buses, 3 tiers in the morning, you run a very efficient network that's designed. It's part of my praise of these people being good at what they do. They run an efficient network. If you have an undeliverable child on the first tier in the afternoon because the parent of a 1-year-old's not, or a first grader's not there, those buses are going to be late at the second and the third tier. If there's a train that pops up and is delayed, those routes are going to be slow. Sometimes employees, despite how well you think you've trained them and you've background checked them, they will disappoint you in the decisions they make. And my guess is that happens in the schools as well. And it's gut-wrenching when it happens, but it happens. And so things will happen.
We're not all perfect people.
No. And it's a partnership here, right? So these folks are doing the routing, for instance. I think we'll be in a position, if you want to run 440 buses, we'll run 440 buses. But I don't know that the district and the taxpayers want to pay for 440 buses. So you're constantly trying to figure out, how do I make it a little more efficient? And 71% triple tiered and 26% double tiered is pretty darn good by industry standards. But that means things are tight. It does. It means things are very tight. You know, if kids are slow coming out of a school in the afternoon. When I spend a lot of time with superintendents and their principals, and I come away a lot of times with recognizing a lot of the complaints are coming from the second and third tiers. And again, it's just the dynamics that happen. And again, the right thing is to use that bus efficiently, right? We're out spending $80,000, $90,000 on a bus and a driver. I'd much rather that driver have a 6 or 7 hour day than a 4 hour day, or it's really hard to find them. And you'd much rather taxpayers would much rather pay for that bus to be used 3 times a day in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, than buy 3 times more buses and single tier it. I was in, actually in Lisa's position in Chicago Public Schools, and our cost per student was over $10,000 a student. I think here it was like 1,600, because we were like 1.5 times tiered, because principals could do what they want with bell times, and then you had 80 magnet schools and special needs and homeless kids, and so you're just not running full buses. So my point is, obviously our commitment, not just culturally, but system-wide, will be to service everyone to the best of our ability, and it doesn't mean you won't get some. If my child's consistently getting late and I'm calling Lisa's folks and I'm not comfortable, eventually I'm going to call my school board member and tell them I've got a problem.
Thank you.
Mike?
You're very welcome.
I have a very, in my mind, a complicated question. It'll take me a little bit to get it out.
Sure.
It concerns budgeting that we're looking at in the future and what has happened in the past with First Student. A couple of years ago, we had a budget deficiency and we had to cut programs
Yeah.
because of the state not giving us money, which isn't your fault. I get that. But we got hit with a change in contract mid-term that we had to vote on that wasn't very comfortable for me to do. We, in our infinite wisdom with our state board, have a deficiency coming at us in a couple of years because they're underfunding, they didn't fund us right. That's if the legislature pays attention in the future and doesn't change what the state board has presented. You know, so we're looking in 2 years, possibly a deficit to our budget, which means we're gonna have to cut something.
Right.
What answers would First Student have for us? Because I would rather cut busing than social emotional programs. How is First Student, I guess the correct way to ask it is, how would First Student work with us
Yeah.
to make our budget stabilize so that we're not hurting our children's education and giving them everything that we can in the classroom while still getting them to the classroom? And I understand that's a big part of it too.
Sure. Good question, Mike. Let me first mention that that negotiated agreement 3 years ago was every bit as painful to me as it was to you, and your shortened school year was very painful to me. We have been upside down on this contract the last 3 years. And to your point, we signed a contract and even made some minor adjustments to it 3 years ago, but we have been subsidizing student transportation here for 3 years. And at some point, we've got to get it right going forward. We're not recapturing anything behind, even the stuff we're doing this year. That wage change is $1 million out of our pocket to get that accelerated because it's the right thing to do. Fabian mentioned that the structure they've put in place here allows for an increase or decrease in the number of buses without us fighting over it. So part of the price increase, think of the price increase that's coming here. Part of it is, again, driver wages are up 50% because that end of the market for any work. I mean, turn on the radio, Amazon's hiring, everybody's hiring for holiday stuff has gone up, or our rates have gone up 22%. So that's a big piece. Lisa mentioned, or Fabian, that we were running 536 buses in 2010, now we're running just over 400. That strained at a lot of fixed costs. The technology stuff. So all that stuff's what's driving what now would be an equilibrium, I think a very fair price, and by any metrics you've looked at, certainly at the market or below the market. Now, if you want to cut the thing in a couple of years, because you have to, and I understand you're not here that you want to spend your money on principals and great teachers and great paraprofessionals, and that's what you want to do. The way of doing that is changing programs then, because you've got to get buses off the street to get the costs down in the end. And we've got a contract that allows us to do that. Now, as a vendor, we work with our districts. We have a group of 20 people that do routing. We have First Planning Solutions, because the real key to efficiency, these folks have already figured out, is really the utilization of the bus. So that's far better than, you know, you can change your walk zone from 2.5 to 3.5, but that's usually a really poor way of reducing expense. It doesn't get you much, it disrupts a lot of people. Your phones will ring off the hook here, like you'll be hated. And you won't cut many buses because you're already not running full buses in all cases. So the key is we have to cut some buses and figure out how to do that together. Now we do that all the time cooperatively with I'm sure we do it today. We suggest, hey, we're tight, here's routes we see that aren't working as well, or here's 2 routes that can get combined so we can park a bus. We'll do that. In some cases, unfortunately, we've had to do that because we don't have the driver to drive it, right? And then you say, hey, that does work. I think I like running one less bus because it costs me less money. So we'll always work cooperatively on that. But in the end, is to be honest with you, I mean, the number of buses has to come down for my cost to go down. I mean, we are a private enterprise. While we've subsidized this the last 3 years, it's not my goal to subsidize public education. It's my goal to be the most efficient and effective so that people choose to use me, and I can still make some sort of return to buy these vehicles and pay my people a living wage.
I appreciate that. And one question, I want to make sure that I'm clear on something here, and I guess so that everybody in the world is clear on this. We're talking about a change from $27 million a year to $33 million a year in busing.
That's, yeah, that's the approval amount that we're requesting.
And I think that's important for people to hear because they say we're spending money strangely, and our legislators pound us all the time, but basically a large percentage of our budget is just getting the kids to and from school. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And I guess the backside question of that is, and I haven't heard this in any of the presentations, is we're paying for the fuel now for these buses to run. Are we going to continue to pay for the fuel?
Yes, that's part of this agreement. Is we'll
So
continue.
we'll still have another, what does that run, $2 million a year in fuel? Depending on the fuel prices?
Yeah, it varies greatly. I do think probably $1.5 million to $2 million, but I'm not.
You know, I
sure
know
on
fuel
the
prices
basis.
are down, which is fantastic, and I
Yeah.
wish we had big tanks we could start filling them up, but, so we could hedge on the price. So, you know, basically, we're talking about 33 million plus another 1.5 to 2 million, so $35 million a year for busing, which is gonna be increased 2.5%.
Yeah, and
over annually, which is compounded, and that's where our state board screwed up, was they didn't compound our CPI.
and again,
So we're gonna pay the compound to get the buses, and this is kind of a little speech, and I'm sorry, but I gotta get this out.
I have no place to go, Mike. Go ahead. I'm here for the night.
But I just want people to realize, when they come at us with budget questions, that this is a big deal. This isn't just, you know, you don't see this. This is kind of like, it's not in the schools. We don't see it. We don't hear about it unless somebody screws up. And I think people need to realize, from a budget standpoint, this is important, a big deal. And I appreciate what you said, because that's, puts me at ease that if we run into troubles, we can negotiate. And that's all I can
You'll
ask.
control your expenses. You'll control your expenses. But it's decisions you'll have to make and work together, but by cutting buses, you'll save money.
And your conversation was very well welcome, explaining why you need the increase, because, you know, that's the first time I've really heard that. I've heard it, but not heard it.
I've felt it every month.
I understand. I used to own a business, and I understand fixed costs.
and just go ahead. Sorry.
I'm done. I'm off my soapbox.
No,
Take my soapbox and go home.
And just add to that 33 million approval is, I believe, counting for or budgeting for 420 daily routes. That doesn't mean we'll run 420. So there's a possibility that number could be lower, but at least for now, because we don't know what our enrollment is going to be like a year from now, whether we'll have increases or not. But again, we budgeted because we feel 420 buses is where we should be at. That's where we set the current pricing at, and the approval amount also.
I appreciate all your hard work, guys. I mean, and I appreciate your willing to work with us. I really do. I don't mean to come across as grumpy or angry, but
No, I've been on your side, and that's your job. I mean, that's what I said. These people are very good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. It's
And I know what
been a
you-
long process for all of us.
I understand your concessions, and I appreciate
Yeah.
appreciate all of that, and plus your staff and your help. It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
We still have a couple of questions. Ben?
Sure.
It's just a short one, and it's just not really a question, of course. But I had to take off my school board hat and put on my engineer at Spirit hat for a bit and say that we're sorry about the the trains full of airplane parts that stop buses. And that's it.
It's your fault.
Yeah, it's my fault. So sorry about that.
Julie?
Just to follow up on the reducing the number of buses to reduce our costs, what that would mean would be reducing service.
The service scope. So, and we've talked about that. We brought you guys some potential options. You know, whether it's increasing the walk distance to stop, which we're pretty generous on, anything from static stops, which were mentioned, changes to the magnet transportation. But there are, I do feel we are running as efficiently as possible when you talk about that significant reduction, that I think anything additional is going to require a policy change on your behalf in order for us to lower.
And again, bottom line, what that means is providing less service
Yep,
to
less kids
and
getting
families.
busing. That's
Yeah.
correct.
If I had a
Thank
nick-
you for running such an efficient system. So,
If I had a nickel for every time someone considered bell time changes but then not implemented them or policy changes, I mean, it's an attractive to look at and very challenging, as you guys know, as elected officials to execute.
yes.
Okay. I am seeing no other questions, and we really do appreciate all of you, all of our staff's work on this, and your company, and you coming here to talk to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
I
much.
do think we need to have a motion on this, because you're wanting a motion for us to extend this contract, this addendum, correct?
That's correct.
We accept this contract.
A second.
Okay, there was a motion to accept the addendum as proposed. It was moved by Mike and seconded by Ben. Please cast your vote. Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Great to continue in Wichita. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Great to see you again.
Before we close, I would be remiss if we didn't recognize, you talk about the efficiencies from our system. Really, the reality is we're not. It's our team, our internal team that does a lot of that. And we have some members of our team back there. So if you guys wouldn't mind standing up so we can recognize you for the work that you guys do. Obviously, they're happy with me because I just did that. But they're the heartbeat of our
I
operation.
think First
And I was getting
Student
ready to
has
say-
more members
I
of
was
their
going to say,
team
we
as
have
well.
another,
Do you
some
want
more
to stand?
teammates that are here too.
Thank you very much. You will all sleep better tonight.
First time in a year.
Next item, Mike.
Continuing under